Hi, I'm Wilson Hurley. Welcome to Compassion's Compass, Module 1. It's an introduction to skills for enhancing compassionate insight. Sylvia Burstein said, "The mind is like tofu. It tastes like whatever you marinate it in." So in these exercises, we're going to go over ways that you can steep your mind in different cognitive states that will help you develop your compassion and your empathy and your insight. The technique I'll be sharing with you is called COMPASS, which stands for Compassion and Analytical Selective Focus Skills. There's a book called Compassion's Compass, Strategies for Developing Insight, Kindness, and Empathy that was published by Roman and Littlefield. And there's a foreword in that from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and lots of good information, techniques, strategies, illustrations that might help you in your path. The techniques in Compass were derived from a tradition called mind training that was a tradition brought down in Tibet from teacher to disciple over the centuries. One of the authors of the mind training tradition was Geshe Jikawa Yeshe Dorje, who lived from 1102 to 1176. In his text, known as the 7-point mind training, he started out by saying, "Know this text to be like a diamond, the sun, and a medicinal tree." What this means in this context is like a diamond, when you know how to transform obstacles into a path for developing your compassion and your insight, it gives you great internal wealth. Like the sun that nurtures all crops, it helps you grow positive states of mind. And like a medicinal tree, it helps you heal the parts of your mind that may be in pain or may be afflicted or may be troubled. So when he says that we're in the times of the 5 degenerations, what that refers to is when people's lifespan starts to get shorter, when conflicts tend to be more intense, when people get more obstinate and combative, when people's viewpoints get more distorted and out of touch with reality, and when people's afflictions of mind are increasing. So in a way, it kind of describes the times we're in. The idea is that when you know these techniques, you can transform them into a way to increase your compassion, your resilience, and your wisdom. Two other strategies have been derived from Tibetan mind training traditions and have been thoroughly researched. One's called cognitive behavioral compassion training that was researched at Emory. Research on that showed that it activated neural responses conducive to empathy and emotional regulation. It increased hopefulness and decreased generalized anxiety. It reduced stress-induced immune and behavioral responses. Another strategy developed out of Stanford by Thupten Jempa is compassion cultivation training. When that was put to the test, it was shown to enhance empathic accuracy. It increased compassion for others, openness to receiving compassion from others, and self-compassion. And also it enhanced mindfulness and happiness and showed a decrease in worry and emotional suppression. Compass has been given 3 small pilot studies, 2 at George Mason and a third at University of Maryland. At George Mason, participants indicated increased positive emotions like empathy and compassion, decreased fear of compassion, and positive anticipated increases in empathy and compassion. The third formal pilot study at University of Maryland's on-campus psychotherapy clinic and research lab found an increase in mindfulness in the pre and post testing, and the therapist reported that centering supported a positive state of being, self-care, and self-reflection. There are 3 sets of contemplative skills in the Compass approach. It begins with foundational mindfulness skills, and then it launches into core compassion skills. There are 8 of those. And then it ends with core analytical skills. The 3 sets of contemplative skills in Compass are broken down in this series in modules. This first module is an introduction. Module 2 will go over the foundation practice of mindfulness. In the third module, equanimity. The fourth, gratitude. The fifth, forgiveness. The sixth, kindness. In module 7, we get to how to cultivate compassion. Module 8 is called giving and taking. Module 9 is activation. Module 10, goal-focused compassion. And Module 11, analytical skills. So let's start by defining empathy and compassion. There are two types of empathy, cognitive and emotional. Cognitive empathy allows us to imagine what another might be experiencing. Emotional empathy causes us to feel a similar experience to what another is feeling. Compassion, as defined in Merriam-Webster Dictionary, is a sympathetic consciousness of others' distress together with a desire to alleviate it. One group of researchers who published a paper called How We Empathize with Others, a Neurobiological Perspective, made this diagram, and you can see two areas shaded in the brain. One is light gray and the other is darker gray. The light gray areas represent parts of the brain that are associated with what's called bottom-up processing. Those are parts of the neurology that take in information from our senses and so forth. In this case, they reflect what are called mirror neuron systems that mirror what we perceive in others in their facial gestures and so forth. And then the darker region, particularly what's called the prefrontal cortex, are called top-down areas that help us take perspectives, being aware of the difference between ourselves and others. The bottom-up is the sharing of emotion, and the top-down helps us interpret different emotions that we perceive. Another group of researchers came up with this model for how they think empathy may be processed. On the lower left, you see a picture of a woman's face, and then pathways that get activated neurologically as we process seeing the stimulus. The blue areas in the brain that you can see in the top part of the slide show social inference. For instance, do we see the woman as blameless and trustworthy, and so forth. The red parts of the brain that you see highlighted indicate where we start to have affective feelings. Do I feel distress at seeing her? Or do I feel like she's approachable? Or should I avoid? Those kinds of impulses. And then the green area that you see, the ventral medial prefrontal cortex, is where we process emotional meaning. For example, this poor woman needs my help, or this undeserving woman's suffering does not matter to me. And depending how we process, we either avoid or we help the person. It's important to understand that we have competing biological systems. One system is called the vigilance to threat system, like the amygdala that you saw on the previous slide, that react to fear, distress, anxiety, hostility. And these easily hijack our attention and suppress compassionate responses. In fact, our neurology has a bias, a negativity bias, that makes us look for danger first, and that kind of becomes a priority over everything else. Training and self-regulation strategies like mindfulness can calm the amygdala's fight or flight reactions and provide a foundation for regaining and developing compassion, which is why Compass starts with mindfulness practice. Condon and Barrett in 2013 found that compassion is viewed as a positive emotion, but the experience of compassion can heighten negative affect. Therefore, self-care is an important component to consider, and that's why we start in Compass with self-care too. Pleasure mechanisms of the brain are activated by acts of compassion, so ultimately compassion is a offers us a good feeling and a positive reward system for acts of kindness. There's a neurobiological link between compassion and love. Compassion and love engage our limbic system, causing release of neurotransmitters like dopamine and endorphins that make us feel good, releasing the hormone oxytocin, which is called the love hormone, also releasing adrenal corticoids, morphine, and nitric oxide. All of these help reduce our stress and our suffering. They activate our mirror neuron system. This allows us to mirror what we perceive in others. There are some cultural variations in empathy. In one study, the researchers found that higher empathy scores are associated with enhanced willingness to give, to help, and to share. Cultures that emphasize collectivism tend to have higher empathy scores. Individualistic cultures tend to have lower scores on empathy. So empathy is not universally valued, but it is very valued in many cultures. The 10 countries with the highest empathy scores are listed here. This is one study. Ecuador at the top, then Saudi Arabia, then Peru, Denmark, United Arab Emirates, then Korea. US was 7th, Taiwan 8th, Costa Rica 9th, and Kuwait was 10th. However, it is clear that empathy and compassion are crucial in the helping process. Empathy and compassion have been linked to positive patient medical outcomes. Successful psychotherapeutic relationships via an ability to accurately assess, understand, listen to, and respect client perspectives, and many other studies as well. In the Compassion's Compass book, there's a chapter called What's in It for Me? And in there's a lot of citation of research that show the downside of excessive self-focus compared to the benefits of having a compassionate focus. Excessive self-focus is linked to dysphoric reactions to difficulties, poor problem-solving abilities, heightened social anxiety, more anger and aggression, especially when feeling threatened, relationship problems, less satisfaction and well-being, poor stress regulation, coronary artery disease, and risk-taking behaviors. Whereas compassion is associated with a sense of well-being and happiness, the release of endorphins and oxytocin, better heart health, improved medical outcomes, decreased in depression, better social connections and relationships. It acts as a buffer against stress, a lessening in anger and aggression, increasing in cooperation and collaboration, and giving us more social support. So let's try an exercise. In this exercise, just simply focus on your breathing, allowing your breathing to be natural. And as you're breathing, just imagine someone you care about sitting in front of you. As you breathe in, imagine breathing in well-being to yourself. As you breathe out, imagine breathing out well-being to the person that you're imagining in front of you. If you'd like, you can imagine that the well-being is a soothing light that enters as you breathe in. And as you breathe out, that soothing light fills the person in front of you with well-being. And you can continue this as long as you like. So that's the introduction. Module 2 will focus on the foundation practice of mindfulness. If you'd like to learn more about Compass, I encourage you to read the book, or you can visit the website compassmethods.com and sign up for a free mini course.